People who've been stuck on the same rank forever rejoice. I will demonstrate that ELOHell exists. People who have been advocating for players to improve their play to increase their rank rejoice. I will preach pretty much the same solutions that you would. And I will use shitty MS Paint graphics to do both of these things. See, the thing about ELOHell is that most people don't really understand what it is. What ELOHell isn't is a space in which you cannot advance because your teammates are always shit, at least not exactly. This explanation will include maths, but don't worry. Anyone who has ever worked with me can attest to the fact that I absolutely despise calculations, so there's not going to be many of them here. Essentially, ELOHell is any range of ranking where the distribution of individuals who are bad at the game among 12 players is an uneven number, and to a much lesser extent, where it is an even number but poor players still exist. Let me explain this. With the way Overwatch works, if you have one useless player on your team, be they a troll, mechanically terrible, plagued by Comcast disease, or just stupidly stubborn about playing the wrong hero all the time, you will very probably lose the match, provided there is not also such a player on the enemy team to balance it all out. Thus, the problem will only frequently occur where the concentration of idiots is 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, or 11 per 12 players. When the number is even, there's still a chance that you'll have 2 idiots in one team and none or only 1 in the other, but it's much lower. In this video, we'll be focusing on the classic ELOHell, the infamous average ranks, wherein the concentration of bad players is 1 per 12, because they also introduce good players to the equation, which can make your bad player much more effective at being ineffective. But first, a lesson about randomness. Something you'll hear ELOHell deniers say very often is that if the likelihood of having an idiot on your team versus the likelihood of having an idiot on the enemy team is 50-50, which as you'll later find out it isn't, it will cancel itself out. While this is technically true, it cannot be applied to a real-world situation. Picture a 6-sided die. The likelihood of it landing on each individual side is exactly 1 in 6, so by that logic, if you throw it 60 times, each number should have been rolled 10 times. However, if you actually do this, you'll find that that is not necessarily what happens. Instead, you get several random strings of numbers, the general distribution of which is around even, but does fall upon a bell curve. This is because the die throw is still a random system, and while an even distribution of numbers thrown is the single most likely outcome, other less likely outcomes will occur, especially if you generate 15 million chains of 60 rolls, because that's what we're going for here. Each of these strings is meant to represent an individual player, and for some of them, the dice will roll poorly. The only way to guarantee that the distribution will be exactly even would be to roll not 60 but an infinite number of times, which, I don't care how much Overwatch you play, you do not play an infinite amount of matches. In order to apply this to Overwatch, we will satisfy my Dungeon Master heart and upgrade our D6 to a D12. Assuming we are in an area of ranking where there comes one terrible player on 12 players, the likelihood of an idiot landing in either team is 50-50. But wait, that's not good enough. For this ELOHell thing to work, we need to assume that you are a good player who is ranked lower than they should be, and is not rising because of factors outside of their control. If you're just an average player playing on an average rank, which, let's be fair, there's a good chance that's exactly what you are not in ELOHell. You're where you belong. If you are, however, a good player, this means that there's a higher chance the terrible one will play for the enemy team, because you'll be playing with 5 randoms against 6 randoms. Thus, the chances of the idiot being in the enemy team is 59%, while the chances that he is on your team is 41%. But Burger, you might say, Isn't it reasonable to assume that even the best players have a bad game once in a while and become the idiot, thus, assuming it happens once every 12 games, reverting the chances of there being a bad player in any given team to 50-50? Sure, I might answer, but we here at Bear Arms are positive people, so we'll just assume that you consistently play better than others on your rank. So this all means that there's a 41% chance you'll lose any given game, which, if it happens 50% of the time, means you're pretty much stuck on your rank with no fault of your own, because the dice fall poorly for you more often than they do not. Remember, the only way to guarantee the most likely throw of the die occurs is to throw it an infinite number of times, meaning to play an infinite number of matches. If you don't, you will always have a fraction of the players caught in the unfavorable half of the bell curve, because things which are unlikely are by no means impossible, and while the average player that is better than their rank will never have this problem, some of them will. How many that is, I can only very poorly guess, so I won't. But I can say that for you personally, dear viewer, the chances of having such bad luck so consistently is incredibly low, and you're probably not in ELO-Hell. Now, of course, defining the outcome of a game based on a single factor does not do Overwatch justice. In fact, the ELO system isn't that simple either, and while poor players in your own team being the primary cause of your failure is probably the most influential factor, there are many others that can heavily affect the game. The aforementioned good players, for example, will probably have a bigger impact on the outcome of the match if they are on the enemy team than if they are on your team, because it is far easier to exploit the idiocy of the poor player on your team than to make up for it. You might be playing with or against a very lucky player, with or against some pro Smurf account. The idiot on your or the enemy team might be effective because his opponents don't know how to counter him, and are thus not very good players themselves, which of course assumes that you are playing an essential hero that cannot counter the idiot and cannot switch yourself. At the end of the day, however, it would still be a pretty solid estimate that if you are a player who plays better than the rank they are in, the chances of victory in any given match will be around 60-40 in your favor. Remember, this doesn't mean you won't be stuck in ELO-Hell. That is still very much possible, it's just not very likely. So how do you get out of ELO-Hell? Well, the first thing you do really is to stop wallowing in self-pity and start following the advice of ELO-Hell deniers and become a better player. But above all, you have to play more matches. The more matches you play, the closer to infinity you get, and the higher your chances of rolling well consistently become. Plus, improving your play, communication, and generally not bringing the Dead Sea into the game with you will significantly improve your chances of winning. Learn how to comp, counterpick, and play your heroes well. Stay aware of the meta, train your aim, and you will become even better. Call the shots as the best player in your team, teach them some stuff they might not know yet, and above all, don't be a cunt. There's countless of videos and channels out there that will teach you how to become a better player, some of them right here, though Karas's in-depth hero guides tend to be focused on more advanced players, but I recommend you take a look at them anyway, wink wink self-promotion. However, here are some tips from me personally. Don't play Bastion. Don't play Bastion in competitive. Learn other heroes and play them instead of Bastion. Stop being a cunt and take your "it's just a game" bullshit whenever someone calls you out for playing Bastion to quick play, where it belongs. Don't play competitive at all. Stop playing Overwatch. Cancel your internet and move to rural Mongolia to live in a tent. If you are not willing to do any of the above, consider suicide. Be an asset to your team. Don't play Bastion. Ever. Also, don't play Attack Junkrat. Just don't. Sponsored by the International Association Against Omnics and Australians. CEO, Alexandra Zaryanova. Exclusive jurisdiction, London, United Kingdom. We're okay with Zenyatta because he's a cool robot monk. And Roadhog's fine because he's probably not even Australian. We're not quite sure how we feel about Genji.